nodes, these different servers, they can only talk to each other. They cannot communicate to the outside world. If I have a second blockchain, I have a problem now. How can I transfer value from one chain, which can only see each other, to another chain that can only see each other? So the solution here is to introduce a bridge.
Hello, and welcome to Blockchain Bylines. My name is Nicolas Cary, co-founder and vice chairman of Blockchain.com. For this month's Bylines episode, we're really excited to host Philipp Zentner, co-founder of LI.FI. LI.FI is a multi-chain liquidity aggregation protocol serving all major decentralized exchange aggregators and bridges. Now, I know Philipp can teach us a lot, so without further ado, we're just going to jump into this month's Byline episodes. We have a little tradition around here. We have to find out how you got into crypto in the first place. How did you fall down the rabbit hole?
Sure, Nicholas, thank you for having me. I'm Philipp, co-founder and CEO of LI.FI. The way I came into crypto was essentially by accident. My co-founder Max and I, we were in between projects where we just shut down another company and we were like looking out what to do next. And a friend of mine who is a YouTuber, and he's in the business of trying out new businesses every 3 months and then documenting his journey on YouTube. And he was calling me. He was like, "Phil, have you heard of NFTs?" I was like, "Yeah, I heard of it." It was beginning 21, so NBA Top Shots were like the thing everyone was talking about. And long story short, he invited me to do a hackathon over a weekend. We did that. And then I touched base with Web3 technology. First time in my life. I never had a wallet before. And for me, Nicholas, it felt like the internet 2002. Remember when you still had to optimize websites for different browsers and you had like browser switches and it was like everything, nothing was documented, frameworks.
A lot of people don't remember just how buggy the internet was back in 2002. You had Netscape, Microsoft Explorer. There were early other browsers that were forging. There were many competitors, and going from one to the next would actually have a terrible experience. So it's funny that you talk about that being your gateway into all of this. So talk to us a little bit about the platform name LI.FI. Why did you name it that?
So LI.FI is actually short for linked finance. Linked finance, the idea is to interlink anything that moves financial assets across this DeFi space. And at some point, so linkedfinance.com cost like $500,000. We didn't have the money. And we went with the Leaf Finance. And then I found li.fi as a domain, 4-character domain. That was like, again, like me, 12 years old again. I was like, 4-character domain. Yeah. So it took me 6 months to get that domain from like a Finnish guy that was surprised that I want to have that domain. Got it from him, took quite some time, and we renamed it to LI.FI, which is difficult because actually the Wi-Fi competitive technology called LI.FI. It's Wi-Fi, but based on light. So we might rebrand at some point.
Yeah. When you get the cease and desist letter, you can make that decision then. Okay. So until then, we have LI.FI.
Yeah.
So in the past, you've talked a little bit about the positioning for LI.FI as the ultimate cross-chain bridge and DEX or decentralized exchange aggregator. I think crypto has sometimes, for better or worse, a lot of jargon in it. So if you want to talk to us a little bit about what you mean by a cross-chain bridge, what is a bridge in crypto and what is a DEX aggregator, and take us through the user journey and what problem you guys are solving.
So first of all, let's maybe start talking about the general problem. Blockchains are similar to databases, right? We are storing data. We are storing that in a decentralized fashion, like we have redundancy in the data we save. That doesn't really scale well. It doesn't. If you look at typical databases, they scale horizontally, like you add more power to it to a certain degree, but then vertically to a certain degree by adding more power to it, more space, more CPU, whatsoever. But at some point, you simply scale horizontally by having sharding or you have different ways to expand that database. And you can tell that, for example, by Google or by Facebook having huge data centers. This is like a horizontally scaled database, or actually it's thousands of databases. But databases are hard to scale. Now, blockchain makes it exponentially harder. What it means is we are not only seeing one blockchain being dominant, we are seeing by now 100 blockchains. Like it's like constantly expanding. Ethereum at some point came up with that roll-up concept. That means we execute transactions on a separate chain and then we only save the executed data on the settlement chain on the layer 1 on Ethereum itself. There are also layer 3s and like scaling happens across many chains, and the space is expanding very fast. Now, if the space expands across multiple blockchains, we have data fragmented across all of that. And with data, liquidity, money. So in order to access all that liquidity, a top level application, let's say a brokerage app, has to tap into all these different chains, has to aggregate all this, all the liquidity, all the information about where is money at, what are the prices, what are the assets. And this is a huge pain essentially any top level application that just looks at crypto as a whole has. So when we came into the space, it was not yet that fragmented. But we saw right away that this is going to happen. So we thought, if this is about to happen, someone needs to aggregate anything that's responsible for swapping and moving assets on and across multiple chains. And this is what LI.FI has been building. We are essentially like a high-level meta aggregator. We are not a DEX aggregator. A DEX aggregator does something different. A DEX aggregator takes the fact that certain asset pairs are available for swapping on multiple decentralized exchanges on one chain. And in order to reduce price impact for larger trades, it then takes large orders, splits them across multiple DEXs. So this is about having a price efficient algorithm and tapping into as many liquidity pools as possible. LI.FI doesn't do that. LI.FI does price comparison. We are level above. We ask everyone for the best price possible for any asset route. It's a smart order routing. You could think of Skyscanner or Google Flights. I simply talk to all the airlines and anything in between I might need. Like if I use Google Maps, I want to get from A to B. It shows you, hey, you have to walk 5 minutes to take the bus for 30 minutes. Then you take the plane for 2 hours, and then you need a train for another hour, and then you walk 6 minutes, and then you are at your goal. And that is how LI.FI is working, and we offer that as an enterprise product to top-level applications, and therefore we are serving the largest wallets in the space, from Binance Web Wallet to Phantom to MetaMask, but also Robinhood, Brave, OpenSea, and many other large players.
LI.FI is definitely a B2B offering. If you're an engineer out there building a user experience, a brokerage service, or a new wallet or something like that, definitely something to consider. And I think a lot of people in the crypto space probably not as aware of all the trade-offs that come with basically scaling these blockchains. And if you're going to build a service or interface with crypto at all, you're going to have an extraordinary amount of coverage on these things, unless you partner with somebody that's doing all the heavy lifting for you. And that sounds a lot like the business model for you guys. We'd love to hear a little bit, like, what is the business? Do you guys price on a subscription basis? Is it on a number of transactions? How does it work?
We most often add simply bips on top of the transaction. And how much that is differs per enterprise partner. Like, it's an enterprise business. We negotiate these transaction fees with each partner individually. It really depends on what's the volume, who is the end user. I'll give you an example. If the end user is an institutional customer that moves in average $10 million per transaction, it's a different story than if the end consumer is like the retail user that sits in front of the TV, saw the Robinhood advertising, downloaded the app, and doesn't care about 200 bips, right? It's like, it really depends on who is the end user, what's the average transaction size, all of that. Still figuring that out, to be honest. It's really hard to generalize that pricing model. In average, we end up with 17.6, 17.8 bips.
Got it. Okay. And describe to me like the ideal customers you're hoping to get on board LI.FI in 2025.
In 2025, I really hope we're going to see more institutional trading desks tapping into DeFi liquidity. So anyone who has already touched CeFi liquidity, centralized liquidity, like working with centralized exchanges and so on, everyone that has been doing that so far and is now interested into expanding into the wider DeFi space by accessing DeFi assets that are on chain, that are not on a centralized exchange, but on a decentralized exchange. Those are the people we want to talk to, and those are the ones that we already see also coming towards us. We see that the space is opening up institutional interest is rising and more platforms want to have DeFi exposure. We help them to get there and typically also consult them on a lot of security related stuff.
Great. Thank you. So I wanted to ask someone who's an expert and spends their time communicating these concepts this question. So if I was trying to explain to someone pretty new, they heard about NFTs like digital trading cards, but now there's all these blockchains and there's interoperability, and you were describing bridges and aggregators, specifically those two terms. Why do they exist and how do you define them? And what's sort of the user journey that you guys are solving the problem for there?
Okay, so if we look at a blockchain, and I'm using my hand here as an example, my hand, like each finger is a node. With a blockchain, we essentially say we don't have one centralized server where we save data, and this server is relevant for not only saving but also validating transactions. Because if that would be the case, it could be manipulated, right? Someone with a lot of money could come in and say, I'm going to bribe the person that runs this server and I can manipulate the data. So the idea of a blockchain is to have multiple servers with the same data, and then whenever there is a transaction, I'm asking all the other ones on the network to validate the transaction. So now I have to bribe 5 people. And I might not even know where it is. That's why it's important that blockchains are permissionless, so that I don't need to ask anyone to join this network, right? I want to be able, if I live in Zimbabwe, that I can just start my own server and I'm part of the validating network. That is important. Now, the way this works is that these nodes, these different servers, they can only talk to each other. They cannot communicate to the outside world. If I have a second blockchain, I have a problem now. How can I transfer value from one chain, which can only see each other, to another chain that can only see each other? So the solution here is to introduce a bridge. I need someone in the middle that simply has a smart contract on both chains. So if a user on chain A wants to transfer money to chain B, on chain A, I'm sending money to the smart contract of that bridge. The bridging person has an off-chain entity watching that smart contract. And if that system realizes I have received funds and some information on where to release funds on the destination chain B, then there's a smart contract with money on that destination chain, and the money is being sent to the user's address as desired. That's essentially how a bridge works. Now the problem is, so while we have these two decentralized systems, now we're introducing a bridge in between. A bridge has liquidity pools. It needs liquidity on each chain so that it can lock and release money to certain destinations, right? If the bridge doesn't have money on that destination chain, it can't release money to the user. So a bridge accumulates a decent amount of money on both chains. And now we have a man in the middle. And what if I'm bribing that man in the middle? Now we have the same problem again as a blockchain. So in the best case, the bridging system in between is as decentralized as the networks it connects. So again, a bridge would best case function like a blockchain by being as decentralized as possible. So we're not asking one person, hey, do I have money deposited on chain A? I'm asking this node once. The node has to get that verification from multiple other decentralized nodes. So the moment I'm introducing a bridge, the economic security of both systems is reduced to however secure the bridge is. This makes the bridging topic complicated. Now, I could go a bit more technical. I'm going to leave that out now. What I can tell is there are different bridge designs that take different trade-offs. Because in fact, what we are doing here, we're not sending money, right? What we are sending is information. We're sending data. And we could not only say, hey, by the way, I dropped some funds here, send some funds there. We could build arbitrary logic, right? We could build like very complex applications on top of that and be like, I don't know, hey, do you have funds deposited in this lending protocol? If so, then let me borrow money on that other chain, like complex multi-chain money markets. You can do a lot here. So depending on the use case, you want to have more capabilities within that bridge. So these bridges have different designs, and there are always trade-offs in terms of how generalizable are they, like for what can you use them, how secure are they, and then also how cheap and fast are they, right? The more decentralized it is, the slower it gets. things like that. And the more costly it gets as well. So there isn't some so-called interoperability trilemma. You can Google that. You're going to end up on our websites where we educate you on this. But there are different bridge designs. And us as an aggregator, what we do essentially is we take all these different bridges between different chains and we find you the one you need and the cheapest, depending on your trade size and the security that should be attached to your trade size. If you're transferring $1,000, you want to have low fees. You want to have it cheap and fast. If you're transferring $10 million, you don't mind waiting a few minutes and better go the safe route.
Great. I think it's complicated to answer this question, but I think that's you did a nice job with that. Basically, LI.FI is solving the coordination problem between disparate databases or blockchains and basically providing a digital path or bridge, but an aggregated one to the most affordable liquidity, depending on the trade size and quantity. Talk to us a little bit about the milestones and developments we can expect from LI.FI in 2025.
2025 for us is about multiple things. One thing is to launch on more non-EVM chains. We have been starting with the EVM context, so any chain that is based on the Ethereum virtual machine. We support around 30 of them. Then last year we went to Solana and Bitcoin. But going to a non-EVM chains is a huge amount of work for us. It means it's a new smart contract, it's a new smart contract language, it's completely new data services, technical things like gas estimations, everything works differently. So it's a decent effort to do that. This year we're going to go to Sui, we're going to go to Aptos, Tron, and probably also Ton. So a few more chains on the non-EVM side. A second goal this year is to release our own bridging solution underneath. Why is that important? LI.FI is growing very fast as a business. We have been able to win many large B2B enterprises, and they all come with their own customer demands and often with their own chains. Now, for us, that means we have to knock all the doors of existing bridges. We work with 20 to 30 bridges. So we have to ask them every time, hey, do you plan to launch on this chain? And if so, the coordination overhead goes beyond our own organization, and it's very exhausting and it's not reliable. We need our own solution so that we can launch on new chains faster and independent of third parties. So having our own bridging solution, that is the goal. We just acquired Catalyst, which is a cross-VM intent system, which is essentially a flow that allows the user to express what he wants to do, but doesn't care about how it's being done. And then this intent, the intent could be to bridge from A to B, is then being auctionized to a large network of solvers. That's what we've just acquired. Essentially makes LI.FI a huge order flow marketplace, which was the vision for LI.FI anyways. And so we are slowly becoming a hybrid now between aggregation and marketplace. And this will be LI.FI for the next few years. And those are probably the two major goals. And then the third, essentially just like lots of refactorings, scaling. Scaling is really the number one challenge for us. We do millions of requests a day, and it's hard to scale, especially if you talk to so many third-party APIs. Scaling is more tricky than you think.
Sounds like you got your hands full this year. Integrations with Sui, Aptos, Tron, and potentially Ton, and then working on your own bridging solution in order to fulfill the mission of becoming this order flow marketplace as a concept for how to think about it. So thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. Any maybe closing thoughts or remarks on the future of decentralized finance and linked finance, as your firm's company is called? You talk about the market growing. You see more institutional interest specifically in DeFi, as opposed to just buying some layer one tokens from centralized exchanges. Talk to us maybe about some concluding remarks on where you see things going. I think it's pretty clear you guys are sitting in this really interesting position to help businesses navigate these complexities.
The absolute beauty about our business is that we are completely hype independent. Of course, transaction volumes go up and down as the market fluctuates, but like we are completely trend independent and we are extremely relevant, and we are becoming more and more relevant as the space grows. What I'm personally most excited about is that we are seeing more and more institutions onboarding so-called real world assets, bonds, financial products. I'm excited to see more risk products being replicated on chain. I think this is like where the real stuff starts, where we're going to see financial institutions coming on board, and where DeFi can actually facilitate more efficient global trading of financial products, or this whole term hyper financialization, like these things. And those are very long-term things. This is like me with a 10-year perspective. And that's what I'm saying about. That being said, I'm ignoring everything that's in between. I really try to ignore these constant narrative changes, which are like every 4 months there's a new narrative, and there is so much stuff happening. And I'm trying to ignore these things that are to a certain extent necessary to bring in more liquidity into the space, but also they just don't make the space more legitimate. So I'm just trying to do my job and consult as many enterprises as possible. And I'm just looking forward to solve interoperability and to see real world assets coming on chain.
I think that's a big trend. You'll see the RWAs, or real world assets, and whether it's BlackRock talking about the tokenization of all things or hyper financialization. I think you're right. That's a sort of a 10-year time horizon on all of the world's things really having digital DNA and prices that can be basically traded on decentralized and centralized exchanges. But there are some exciting products that get to basically come to the hands of regular purchasers that have never been available to them before, whether it's alternative assets, risk assets you described, and risk products, among others. So I think there's going to be a really extraordinary few years, and it's going to require builders and people to come in and solve these problems. But the market is very positive to these things right now. Thank you so much for teaching us more about the business. We'll be watching the roadmap come out from you guys with much intrigue. For anyone that's been listening, what's the best place for them to follow the progress of the team? And also, where should they go to learn more?
I think LI.FI, at LI.FI Protocol on X, on Twitter, that's the easiest to stay up to date. We also have a very well-read newsletter. If you're a bit more technical and into interoperability, go to blog.li.fi. This is where we are writing more in-depth research. And if you're a developer, docs.li.fi is our documentation, and there you're going to be find whatever you need.
Great. Okay. The library for nerds. Thank you so much. So without further ado, please remember to subscribe to our channel and leave a review if you enjoyed today's episode. And until next time, I'm Nicolas Cary on behalf of the entire blockchain.com team. Thank you very much for tuning in.